When Elon Musk leaked a private call with Melania Trump, he thought he was exposing a crack in the Trump empire. What happened next, however, no one could have predicted. The audio dropped on the social media platform X at 3:17 p.m. Eastern Time. On a Tuesday, it was only 38 seconds long, a grainy, compressed clip posted without warning from Musk's own verified account. The caption was brutally simple. "The First Lady called me. This is what she said. #truth." Within 6 seconds, it had 1 million views. In 10 minutes, it was the only story that mattered on the planet. News anchors broke into network programming, their faces a mixture of shock and undisguised excitement as they played the audio for a stunned nation. In the clip, Melania Trump's unmistakable accented voice sounded strained, almost desperate. I wish you would stop," the voice said over a faint crackle. "It's too much. It's just too much for anyone to handle." The clip ended, but the political world ignited. #Melanian tapes became the #1 trend worldwide. Pundits, politicians, and prognosticators were in universal agreement. This was a kill shot, an extinction-level event for the Trump campaign. The narrative was instant and absolute. The cool, composed First Lady had finally cracked, admitting in a private, unguarded moment that her own husband was out of control. The attack was devastating not because it came from an enemy, but because it appeared to come from the one person who knew him best. 48 hours earlier, the Florida sun beat down on the tarmac at a regional airport in Central Florida. Donald Trump stood at a podium, a red "Make America Great Again" hat pulled low over his eyes, his voice booming across a sea of supporters. The heat was stifling, but the crowd was electric, feeding on his energy. His speech had been a familiar medley of greatest hits: the border, the economy, the failures of his political opponents. But then, he pivoted to a new target, one he'd been circling for weeks. "And you have these guys, these tech billionaires, right?" he roared, his voice dripping with theatrical contempt. "They think they're kings. They think they own the world. You got this guy, Musk. He goes to space. Good for him. He makes his little cars very nice. But then he buys our town square and thinks he can tell us what to think." The crowd booed on cue. Trump leaned into the microphone. "He's a phony, a total phony. His cars are a disaster. They're all subsidized by the government, and his rockets blow up half the time. This is who's lecturing us." The attack was personal, cutting, and designed for maximum impact. A classic Trump broadside meant to diminish a rival by turning him into a caricature. Miles away, in a glass-walled office overlooking the sprawling Tesla factory in Austin, Texas, Elon Musk wasn't listening to the rally. He didn't need to. His phone was lighting up. The screen, a waterfall of notifications from X's team, was sending him clips, transcripts, and social media reactions in real time. He scrolled through the mentions with a detached amusement, a slight smirk playing on his lips. He saw Trump's insults not as a threat, but as a validation. It meant he was a player, a force so significant that the former president of the United States had to spend 10 minutes of a rally attacking him. To Musk, this wasn't a political battle. It was a battle of influence, and he was convinced he was holding the better cards. He toggled from his messages to the public X feed and began to type. His first post was a meme, a picture of an old man yelling at a cloud. The second was more direct. "Some people's entire platform is just yelling about me," he wrote. Living rent-free, he watched the likes and retweets pour in, a digital tidal wave of his own making. One of his top lieutenants, a sharp, ambitious executive named Harris, poked his head into the office. "He's really going after you." "Today?" Harris said, a hint of concern in his voice. Elon looked up from his phone, his expression unbothered. "Let him," he said. "He's playing checkers. We're playing a different game." He believed he had the ultimate leverage, control over the very platform Trump desperately needed to reach his base. He felt untouchable, overconfident, and was already thinking about his next move, a counterpunch that would be more sophisticated than a simple rally speech. He didn't just want to win the news cycle, he wanted to dominate the narrative itself. Back at Mar-a-Lago, in the quiet, sun-drenched private quarters, Melania Trump was insulated from the direct noise of the political world, but not from its effects. She wasn't watching cable news or scrolling through social media feeds. Her focus was on her son, Barron. He was a teenager now, tall and quiet, navigating a world where his family name was a constant, screaming headline. He had walked into the living room earlier, his face a stoic mask that couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. He didn't say anything about the rally or the increasingly nasty public spat between his father and the owner of X, but he didn't have to. Melania saw it in the way he held his phone, in the subtle clenching of his jaw. He was seeing it all, the insults, the memes, the ugly back and forth that had become the background music of his life. To her, this wasn't about politics, it was about the corrosive, brutal nature of the public arena and the toll it took on her family. She saw her husband's fighting spirit, a quality she had long understood, but she also saw the escalating cycle of public animosity as a bonfire with no end, one that threatened to consume the last vestiges of civility. The decision formed, in her mind, not as a political calculation, but as a maternal imperative. She had to do something. The Be Best initiative she had championed as First Lady felt like a distant, naive memory, but its core principle, the idea that adults had a responsibility to model better behavior for children, still resonated with her. She believed, perhaps, hopefully, that a direct appeal could work. She saw Elon Musk not as a political enemy, but as a father. He had children. Surely, he could understand her concern on that level. A public statement would be a disaster, twisted and weaponized by all sides. This had to be private. It had to be a conversation, not a confrontation. The idea felt risky, a departure from her carefully guarded privacy. But the alternative, doing nothing while the toxic rhetoric escalated, felt worse. She walked over to a small antique writing desk and picked up her phone. She didn't have Musk's number, but she knew someone who could get it. She sent a text to a former White House aide, a woman known for her absolute discretion and deep connections. The request was simple. Please confirm. You can acquire this for me. The response came back in under a minute. Yes, Mrs. Trump, I can stand by. Melania sat down, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. She felt a knot of anxiety, but also a flicker of resolve. She was stepping onto a battlefield, not as a first lady or a political spouse, but as a mother, armed only with the hope that a quiet appeal to shared humanity could succeed where the public shouting had failed. The encrypted number arrived 5 minutes later. Melania Trump wrote it down on a piece of Mar-a-Lago stationery, her handwriting steady and precise. She stood, walked to a soundproof study in a quiet wing of the estate, and closed the heavy wooden doors behind her. For a moment, she just looked at the number on the page. This was a line she had never crossed before, an unwritten rule she was about to break. Her entire public life had been a masterclass in control, in maintaining a carefully constructed wall of privacy. Now, she was about to voluntarily breach it. She took a deep, centering breath, picked up the secure landline. It rang 3 times, each tone echoing in the silent room. She half expected it to go to voicemail, that this gambit would end before it began. Then, the line clicked. Hello! The voice was clipped, distracted, unmistakably Elon Musk. He was in the middle of a high-level engineering meeting at the SpaceX starbase in Boca Chica, Texas, surrounded by a dozen of his top minds. They were troubleshooting a telemetry issue with the latest Starship prototype, when his personal phone, the one with the number only a handful of people had, rang with an unfamiliar caller ID. His first instinct was to silence it. But curiosity, a driving force in his life, won out. He held up a hand to pause the meeting and stepped outside the glass-walled conference room. Hello, he repeated, a touch of impatience in his voice. Mr. Musk, this is Melania Trump. The name landed with the force of a physical shock. Elon stood straighter, his mind racing, instantly dismissing the possibility of a prank call. There was a security protocol for calls to this line, and her voice was unmistakable. He turned his back to the conference room, seeking privacy. Mrs. Trump, he said, his tone shifting from impatient to intrigued. This is an unexpected pleasure. I hope I am not disturbing you, Melania began, her voice calm and measured, devoid of the emotion the world would later project onto it. I am calling you today, not as a political figure, but as a mother. And I am calling you as one parent. To another, Musk leaned against the cool glass, his mind already working, calculating angles. A mother, a parent. This was not the opening he would have ever predicted. He stayed silent, letting her speak. This was an intelligence-gathering opportunity of the highest order. I see what is happening in the world, in the news. On your platform, she continued, choosing her words with immense care. The fighting, the public attacks. My husband, he is a fighter. He has always been this way. But this level of animosity between two of our country's most influential men, it is not healthy. It is not healthy for the nation, and it is not healthy for our children to witness. She paused. You have children. I have a son. They see these things. They feel the anger. It creates an atmosphere, a darkness, and I believe we have a responsibility to them to be better. Inside Musk's mind, 1,000 possibilities were colliding. His first thought was that this was some kind of bizarre peace offering, an attempt at a back-channel negotiation. But as she spoke, another, more audacious idea began to form. This was a moment of incredible vulnerability, a direct line into the psyche of the Trump family. He subtly reached into his pocket and tapped the side of his phone, activating the screen recorder. There was no audible click. It was a seamless, silent action. He felt a faint, illicit thrill. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Trump, he said, his voice now laced with a practiced empathy. It's a very volatile environment. It must be difficult to deal with that level of intensity. He was laying a trap, gently nudging her toward, validating his own narrative. It is difficult for everyone involved, she replied, skillfully sidestepping his framing. I am not calling to place blame. I am not calling to ask you to stop defending yourself. That is not my place. I am simply asking you to consider the tone, the personal nature of it all. There must be a way to disagree without this ugliness. This was the critical juncture. Musk saw his opening. The rally today, for example, he prodded softly. He was very aggressive, calling my companies a disaster. It's a lot to absorb. Melania let out a soft, barely audible sigh. It wasn't a sigh of weakness, but of weariness. She was tired of the whole spectacle. Yes, she conceded. The rallies, the posts, the back and forth, all of it. She looked out the study window at the manicured lawns of Mar-a-Lago, a perfect, orderly world so at odds with the chaos she was trying to quell. This was where she spoke the words that would be twisted and used against her, but in their full context, they were a plea for mutual de-escalation. I just wish, she said, her voice dropping slightly. I wish it would stop. Both sides. It's too much. It's just too much for anyone to handle. He had it. Musk felt a surge of adrenaline. That was the soundbite. Decontextualized, it was pure gold. It sounded like a wife at the end of her rope, admitting her husband was the problem. He pushed a little further, just to see what else he could get. So you're saying you wish he would stop? He asked, feigning clarification. But Melania was too disciplined to fall for it completely. She caught the edge in his question and pulled back. I wish the vitriol would stop, she corrected firmly. From everyone, for the good of the country and our families. That is all I am asking you to consider, Mr. Musk. As a father, she had re-established her frame. The conversation was nearing its end. She had said what she intended to say. Thank you for your time, she said, her tone polite but final. I hope you will think about my words. I will, Mrs. Trump, Musk said, smoothly, the recording still silently capturing every syllable. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your perspective. He ended the call and stood motionless for a full 10 seconds, the faint sounds of the engineering meeting filtering through the glass behind him. He looked down at his phone at the saved audio file. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. He hadn't just won the news cycle. He had just acquired a weapon that could end the entire war. He pushed the door open and walked back into the conference room, his step lighter than before. Sorry about that, he said to his confused engineers. Something came up. Where were we? But his mind was already elsewhere. The moment the meeting concluded, Elon Musk walked briskly to his private office. Harris, his top executive, trailing a step behind. Shut the door, Musk said, not looking back. Harris complied, a sense of nervous anticipation filling the room. Musk didn't sit down. He tossed his phone onto the large desk. Play the file named temp audio, he commanded. Harris picked up the phone, his brow furrowed in confusion. He tapped the screen and a voice filled the room. His eyes widened as he recognized Melania Trump. He listened to the entire 3-minute conversation, his expression shifting from shock to alarm. When it finished, he looked at Musk, speechless. She just called me out of the blue, Musk said, pacing in front of the window, a direct appeal. As a mother, my God, Harris breathed. What are you going to do? What do you think? Musk countered, a glint in his eye. She handed us the narrative on a silver platter. He walked back to the desk and took the phone. He replayed a small section of the audio. I wish he would stop. It's too much. You can't, Harris said, the words coming out before he could stop them. He knew Musk's appetite for risk, but this was different. Elon, this is the First Lady, a private phone call. Leaking this, it's what? Musk cut him off. It's the truth, she said it. The public has a right to know that his own family thinks he's out of control. This isn't a personal attack, Harris. This is a public service. It's radical. Transparency, he was rationalizing it, framing it as a noble act, a necessary disruption to expose a dangerous hypocrisy. Harris, ever the loyal lieutenant, felt his own moral objections beginning to dissolve under the weight of his boss's conviction. He saw the strategic brilliance, the sheer ruthless power of the move. It was a checkmate. What part do we use? He asked, his voice now steady. Just the key part, Musk instructed. Start at I just wish and end it at anyone to handle. 30, maybe 40 seconds. No more. We don't need the context. The context is the trap. The quote is the truth. For the next hour, they worked with a trusted audio engineer in a secure video call, meticulously editing the clip. They cut out her opening, her careful framing. About being a mother, they cut out her clarification that she meant both sides. They isolated only the words that served their purpose, creating a piece of audio that was technically true, but contextually a devastating lie. When the 38-second file was finalized, Musk had it sent directly to his phone. He opened the X app, uploaded the audio file, and began to type the caption. Harris watched over his shoulder, his heart pounding. The words appeared on the screen. The First Lady called me. This is what she said. #truth. Musk paused, his thumb hovering over the post button. He looked at Harris. Ready to break the internet? He asked, a grin spreading across his face. Before Harris could answer, he pressed the button. The post went live. The digital bomb had been dropped for a few seconds after Elon Musk hit the post button. There was silence in his Austin office. It was the quiet of a fuse burning, the pause between a lightning flash and the thunderclap. Then the world erupted. The post didn't just go viral, it was a global concussion. 1 million views became 5, then 20, then 50 million in less than half an hour. Every major news organization sent out a push alert simultaneously, their headlines screaming variations of the same theme. Melania Trump in secret recording, I wish he would stop on CNN. A panel of commentators, usually poised and articulate, stared at the camera with wide, stunned eyes. I'm not sure you can come back from this, one of them stammered. This is a voice from inside the house. His own wife. On Fox News, the anchors were visibly thrown. They played the clip, then sat in a rare, awkward silence, their faces grim as they struggled to formulate a spin for an attack so personal and seemingly irrefutable. One host simply shook his head. We'll have to see what the full context is, he offered weakly, but his voice lacked conviction. It was on MSNBC, where the mood was openly triumphant. This is the moment, a host declared, her voice ringing. With finality, this is the crack in the foundation. The campaign is over tonight. How does Donald Trump stand on a stage and talk about strength when his own wife has admitted, on tape, that it's all too much? Internationally, the story was framed as a uniquely American political cataclysm. The BBC reported on the unprecedented crisis and the weaponization of private conversations at the highest level of U.S. politics. In Germany, Der Spiegel's headline read simply, The Betrayal. The 38-second clip was a universal language and its message was clear. The Trump dynasty was imploding under the weight of its own internal chaos. The hashtag MELANIA tapes was a raging torrent of mockery, analysis, and condemnation. It was joined by hashtag Trump in crisis and hashtag ELON checkmate. The narrative wasn't just set, it was being carved into granite in real time. The world had reached a verdict. Before the accused even knew he was on trial, At Mar-a-Lago, the clinking of silverware against porcelain was the only sound in the private dining room. Donald and Melania Trump were having a quiet dinner, a rare moment of respite from the relentless campaign schedule. The tranquility was shattered when the door burst open. Natalie, a young and fiercely loyal communications aide, stood in the doorway, her face pale and her hand clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling. "Mr. President, I am so sorry to interrupt, but you have to see this. It's Mr. Musk." Trump looked up, his expression a mixture of annoyance and concern at her obvious distress. "What is it, Natalie? What's wrong?" He took the phone from her shaking hand. Melania looked on, a question in her eyes. Natalie simply stood there, frozen, looking at the First Lady with an expression of profound pity. Trump tapped the play button. The grainy audio filled the silent room. Melania's voice, strained and decontextualized. Asterisk. I wish he would stop. It's too much. It's just too much for anyone to handle. Asterisk, the color drained from Donald Trump's face. He listened to it once, then a second time, his mind struggling to process the raw data, a recording of his wife. His initial shock was instantly consumed. By a flash of pure volcanic rage, he slammed the phone down on the table with a loud crack, the screen spiderwebbing. He taped her, he growled. The two words, low and guttural, filled with a menace that silenced the room. For a split second, the world held its breath. Every political instinct, every media prediction, suggested this was the moment he would turn on her, the moment the private rage would match the public humiliation. He turned his head slowly and looked at Melania. Her face was a mask of placid horror, her composure replaced by the naked shock of a profound and personal betrayal. Her hand was pressed against her mouth. "He recorded me," she whispered, the words barely audible. She looked at her husband, her eyes pleading for him to understand. "Donald, that's not what I said. I called him as a mother. I told him the fighting from both sides was too much for the children. For Barron, I said, I wished it would stop the ugliness." He listened. He watched her face, saw the genuine violation in her eyes. And in that moment, a crucial choice was made. The rage in his chest, which had been aimed inward at the heart of his own home, pivoted. It turned outward, its focus narrowing with a laser-like intensity on a single target, Elon Musk. He didn't see a wife who had undermined him. He saw an enemy who had used his wife, who had preyed on her decency, to try and destroy him. The political animal within him, the part that had been momentarily stunned, roared back to life, recognizing the attack not as a death blow, but as a priceless opportunity. This was no longer a story about his temperament. It was now a story about a tech billionaire who secretly recorded a mother's plea and twisted it for political gain. He reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. The gesture was firm, protective. "I know," he said, his voice now calm and steady, a chilling counterpoint to the fury in his eyes. "Don't worry, we're going to fix this." He squeezed her hand. He made a big mistake. He stood up, the switch from husband to commander-in-chief instantaneous. He pulled out his own phone and speed-dialed his eldest son, Don. "Get Eric and Ivanka on the phone with us. Conference call." Now, he then turned to the still-shaken Natalie. "Get my campaign manager, my top comms people. I want them at Mar-a-Lago in 1 hour. Emergency meeting. Tell them to cancel whatever they're doing. This is all that matters now." Within the hour, the war room was assembled. The campaign staff arrived looking ashen, like they were walking into a funeral. They had seen the news, absorbed the universal verdict that the campaign was over. They expected to find Trump either in a state of uncontrollable rage or deep despair. They found neither. He was standing at the head of the long boardroom table, energized, focused, a predator who had just been handed the scent of blood. Melania was not present. He had insisted she rest, shielded from the tactical storm to come. "All right," he began, his voice cutting through the funereal gloom. "You all look like you just saw a ghost. Stop it. I want to be very clear about what happened tonight." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across every face in the room. "They didn't come after me. They came after the First Lady of the United States. They came after your mother," he said, looking directly at his children on the video screen. A billionaire in Silicon Valley thought he could secretly record a private conversation with my wife, edit it to tell a lie, and use it to bring us down. He thinks he can fracture this family. He thinks we're going to turn on each other. He smiled, a cold, thin line. This is not a political problem. This is personal. And that means we are not going to be on defense. We are going to attack. The energy in the room shifted. The despair began to evaporate, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. This was a language they understood. Tomorrow morning, Trump declared, we're holding a press conference, right? Here, the whole world will be watching, expecting to see a family in crisis. Instead, they are going to see a family united. They're going to see strength. And they're going to see a wife and a husband standing together against a disgraceful, sleazy attack. The strategy was born not of desperation, but of ruthless clarity. They would not explain the context of the call. They would condemn the act of the recording itself. They would make Elon Musk the issue, not Melania. The private cost of her violation, the deep wound of her trust being broken, would not be hidden. It would be transformed into a shield and a sword. The next morning, the manicured lawns of Mar-a-Lago looked like a military encampment. A forest of satellite dishes and broadcast antennas had sprouted overnight, aimed at the grand estate. Hundreds of journalists, photographers, and camera operators were crammed behind rope lines, their faces a mix of exhaustion and rabid anticipation. The air crackled with a single question. Would the Trump empire, a political force built on the image of unbreakable strength, finally shatter live on camera? Every pundit and politician had predicted a messy public divorce, a political implosion of epic proportions. They were primed for chaos. At precisely 11 a.m., the ornate double doors of the main house opened. The sea of cameras surged forward, a wave of clicking shutters and worry lenses. Donald Trump strode out, his face set like granite. He wore a dark suit and a crisp white shirt, his signature red tie a slash of defiant color. But it was the person walking beside him who silenced the crowd. Melania Trump, dressed in a sharp, military-style white dress, moved with a deliberate, almost chilling grace. She was not the picture of a woman in crisis. There were no signs of distress, no tear-streaked makeup, no downcast eyes. Her gaze was level and cold, sweeping across the assembled press corps with an expression of utter disdain. She did not look like a victim. She looked like a queen about to pass judgment. She took her place not in a chair to the side, but directly behind her husband, a silent, formidable presence. Her stance was a statement in itself. We are one. Trump stepped to the podium, which was flanked by a dozen American flags that rippled. In the gentle Florida breeze, he gripped its sides and leaned into the microphones. Good morning, he began, his voice devoid of its usual rally-ground bombast. It was low, serious, and resonant. You've all seen the news. You've all heard the tape, a deceptively edited, illegally recorded private phone call from my wife. He paused, letting the words sink in. He wasn't going to defend the content. He was going to prosecute the crime. What you heard was a violation. A violation of privacy, a violation of decency, and a violation of the sacred trust between two people. An act so cowardly and so sleazy, it should shock every American, regardless of their politics. He looked up, his eyes finding the lens of a specific camera, as if he were addressing someone directly. My wife, the former First Lady of the United States, did something honorable. In a world of public shouting, she sought a private conversation. As a mother, she reached out to another parent to appeal for a more civil tone in our country. She appealed to a man's conscience, not knowing that he had none. The press corps was furiously scribbling notes, reporters whispering into their phones, their initial narrative crumbling with every word Trump spoke. This wasn't the speech anyone had predicted, and for this act of grace, Trump's voice grew, louder, laced with cold fury for this attempt at decency. She was secretly recorded and publicly smeared by a tech billionaire who believes he is a king, a man who believes his power and his platform put him above the law, above ethics, above basic human respect. He stood up straighter, his voice reaching a crescendo. Let me be very clear. Elon Musk thought he could break my family to break this country. He gestured behind him to Melania, who hadn't moved a muscle, her expression unreadable and powerful. He is sadly mistaken. My wife is a patriot. And this family, he concluded, his voice dropping to a powerful, resolute growl. Does not apologize for fighting for America. He held the silence for 3 beats. Then, without another word, he turned, placed a hand on the small of Melania's back, and together they walked back towards the open doors. He did not take a single question. He didn't need to. The statement was the message. As they disappeared inside, the press corps erupted. Reporters were shouting, trying to make sense of the stunning reversal. He flipped it, one correspondent yelled into his phone to his producer. He's not the story anymore. The digital tide, which had been a tsunami threatening to drown the Trumps, turned with astonishing speed. Clips of the press conference, especially the "My wife is a patriot" line, began to spread like a counterfire. On X, the very platform Musk had used for his attack, Trump supporters and newly energized sympathizers hijacked the hashtag #MELANIA tapes hashtag, flooding it with the video of the press conference. New, more potent hashtags took root and climbed the trending charts. Hashtag stand with MELANIA, hashtag sleazyelon, hash violated. In his office in Austin, Elon Musk watched the press conference on a large monitor, his smirk slowly fading into a look of disbelief. He had run every simulation in his mind. Trump would rage, he would deny, he would most likely attack Melania, calling her weak or disloyal. The family would fracture under the public pressure. He had never, in any calculation, anticipated this, a disciplined, unified, and devastatingly effective counterattack that repositioned him from the brave truth-teller to the villain of the story. The phone on his desk began to ring incessantly. It was his board members, his investors, his PR chief. His checkmate move had blown up on the board, and the shrapnel was flying directly at him. By that evening, the story had been completely reframed, but it was still largely a partisan battle. The left saw it as a masterful, if cynical, piece of political jiu-jitsu. The right saw it as a righteous defense of family and honor. To truly seal Musk's fate in the court of public opinion, the narrative needed a credible, nonpartisan It got one at 9 p.m. that night. Eleanor Vance, a towering figure in American journalism for over 40 years, appeared on a primetime cable news special. Semi-retired Vance rarely gave interviews, and when she did, the world listened. She was a liberal icon, a fierce feminist, and had been a frequent and powerful critic of Donald Trump throughout his career. The show's host turned to her, expecting a sophisticated takedown of Trump's latest performance. Eleanor, the host began, "You just saw Donald Trump wrap himself in the flag and the honor of his wife. Surely you see this as another cynical manipulation." Vance, poised and elegant in a simple black dress, looked directly at the camera. "My criticisms of Donald Trump's politics are extensive and well documented," she began, her voice calm and authoritative. The host nodded, ready for the attack. "However," Vance continued, "what I saw today, and what I have witnessed over the past 24 hours, is not about politics." The host's smile faltered. "I come from a generation of journalists with firm rules," Vance stated. "You did not, under any circumstances, secretly record a private conversation and broadcast it to the world. You did not take a woman's words, spoken in confidence about the well-being of her child, and twist them into a political weapon. What Elon Musk did to Melania Trump is a profound ethical breach that has nothing to do with left or right, and everything to do with right and wrong. He didn't act as a journalist exposing a crime. He acted as a political operative deploying a surveillance tactic. The precedent this sets should be terrifying to every single American who values their privacy." She paused, her gaze unflinching. "This is not about Donald Trump's character. It is about Elon Musk's, and from where I sit, what he did was shameful." The dam broke. Eleanor Vance's words were a moral thunderclap that echoed across the political spectrum. Her statement gave mainstream audiences, independents, and even some Democrats the moral authority to condemn Musk's actions without feeling like they were defending Trump. The story was no longer about whether the Trumps were in crisis. The only question that now mattered was, did Elon Musk cross a line that could never be uncrossed? With the ground ceded by an unexpected ally, the narrative tide was now an unstoppable force. Elon Musk, who just days earlier had been celebrated on one side and feared on the other as a master of information warfare, found himself completely isolated. He tried to fight back on X, boast in lengthy justifications about the public's right to know and the importance of radical transparency. He argued that Melania's call to him was a matter of public interest, but his words, once so potent, now seemed desperate and self-serving. He was met with a deluge of scorn, not just from Trump supporters, but from a vast, newly formed coalition of users who saw his actions as dishonorable. The clip of Eleanor Vance's condemnation was posted in response to nearly everything he wrote. His power had been predicated on his ability to control the conversation. Now, for the first time, the conversation was controlling him. Inside the Trump campaign, the mood was electric. They had taken their opponent's most powerful blow and turned it back on him, transforming a potential catastrophe into a resounding victory. But Trump knew he needed to land one final, decisive strike. The press conference had been the visceral counterattack. This next move needed to be different. It had to be the definitive closing statement, a speech that would elevate the incident from a personal feud into a parable for his entire political movement. It would not be another media circus. This would be controlled, intimate, and delivered on his own terms. That evening, a video was posted to Donald Trump's Truth Social account. There was no advance warning. The setting was the replica of the Oval Office at Mar-a-Lago, a backdrop designed to project ultimate authority. Trump was seated behind the resolute desk, looking directly into the camera. The lighting was soft, his tone was solemn. The rally-going showman was gone, replaced by the somber leader. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice low and steady. "This has been a difficult week for my family. You have witnessed a vicious and unprecedented attack, not just on me, but on my wife, a wonderful mother and a First Lady of the United States who has always served this country with dignity and grace." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. He did not mention Elon Musk's name. He didn't have to. But this was never just about one family, he continued, leaning slightly forward. It was about you. It was a message from the corrupt and powerful elite to every single one of you. They wanted to show you what they are willing to do to maintain their control. They will lie, they will cheat, they will break the law. They will even secretly record a wife and mother if they think it will stop our movement. He was no longer just the victim of a personal attack. He was the avatar for everyone who felt silenced or trampled on by powerful, unaccountable forces. If they are willing to do this to a First Lady, he said, his voice rising with controlled passion, what do you think they can and will do to you, to your family, to your privacy? The Silicon Valley oligarchs and their allies in the media believe they can dictate our reality. They believe they can crush anyone who stands in their way. He sat back, his expression resolute. But what this past week has truly shown is their greatest weakness. They do not understand the American people. They do not understand our values. They do not understand our spirit. You, the American people, will always stand up for what is right. You will stand up for family. You will stand up for decency against the corrupt tech elite, and our movement, our beautiful, powerful movement, will never, ever be silenced. He ended not with a roar, but with a quiet promise, a statement of unshakable conviction. He had taken a sleazy political hit and transformed it into a modern-day crusade, casting himself as the sole defender of American values against a morally bankrupt and invasive technological aristocracy. 1 month later, the news cycle had spun. On the #MELANIA tapes incident was now a piece of recent history, a wild chapter in a turbulent election season. But its echo remained, subtly altering the political landscape in ways polls and pundits couldn't easily measure. In a quiet, sunlit coffee shop in a suburb of Oakland County, Michigan, a crucial county in a crucial swing state, a married couple, Mike and Karen, were having coffee. They were in their late 40s with 2 kids in high school and a mortgage. They were the embodiment of the undecided voter. "I just don't know, Karen," Mike said, stirring his latte. He was a reader, a man who followed the news and prided himself on making informed decisions. The economy is one thing, but can we really handle 4 more years of the nonstop drama, the tweets, the chaos, ... It's exhausting. Karen, who usually deferred to her husband on politics, looked out the window for a moment before answering. She wasn't a political junkie. Her opinions were formed less by cable news and more by a gut-level sense of right and wrong. "I don't know," she said slowly, turning back to him. "But I saw what that Twitter guy did to his wife. That was just wrong. Secretly recording her like that, twisting her words. You just don't do that. You don't come after a man's family." Mike sighed. "It was a low blow, I'll give you that. But politically, it's not about politics," Karen interrupted, a rare firmness in her voice. "It's about character." Everyone was waiting for him to explode, to blame her, and he didn't. She took a sip of her cappuccino. He stood by her. He didn't even blink. He defended her. That says something. Mike looked at his wife, surprised by her conviction. For her, the entire chaotic spectacle had boiled down to a single, clear, almost primal data point: loyalty. In a world of shifting alliances and political spin, she had seen something she perceived as solid and honorable. A husband defending his wife, a family closing ranks against an outside attack. Donald Trump, through the monumental overreach of his enemy, had won a vote, not with a policy debate or a campaign promise, but with a perceived act of steadfast, unwavering allegiance. The last echo of the battle wasn't a headline. It was a quiet decision being made over a cup of coffee. What does it truly take to change a voter's mind in today's world? Subscribe for more stories that go beyond the headlines.